Thank you, Julie. Let me begin by reiterating what I hope is obvious, which is that the President, the administration, the United States is very, very focused on the imperative of preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. This is a matter of utmost importance to us for a variety of reasons. Obviously, the threat that it poses to Israel is very near the top of the list, but there are a range of other reasons why it is intolerable and unacceptable for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Given Iran's stated intent to wipe Israel off the map, given the threat that it poses to its neighbors, given its continuing and long documented support for terrorism, given the virtual inevitability that it would set off an arms race in a nuclear arms race in an already exceedingly volatile region. For those and many other reasons, we cannot, for our own national security, in addition to Israel's, tolerate a nuclear-armed Iran. The issue is how best to prevent it. And as President Obama said yesterday, ours and his has not and has never been a policy of containment, but rather a policy of prevention. When the administration came in, Iran had gone from 0 centrifuges to thousands of centrifuges spinning. Their internal leadership was very united, and the world was divided amongst itself as to how to combat Iran's nuclear program. In the intervening 3 years, a lot has changed. First of all, Iran's leadership is more divided internally than ever, and the world is more united than ever in its resolve to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. It was that unity built through great hard work and painstaking diplomacy, much of it done by the President himself personally, with Russian then President Medvedev and Hu Jintao, that made it possible for us to get through the Security Council Resolution 1929 in June of 2012, which was a very, very powerful sanctions resolution that in and of itself created a whole new degree of pressure on Iran. But what it also did, very importantly, was lay a foundation whereby the United States, the European Union, Japan, Korea, many of the Gulf countries, on top of that, levied their own additional national sanctions using the Security Council framework as part of the legal justification. You know well that CISADA was passed here in the U.S. Congress with very strong support from AIPAC and the administration, members of Congress from both parties. And we have built over time, layering on 1929, successively more potent economic sanctions on Iran, such that now even the Supreme Leader and Ahmadinejad are acknowledging that these sanctions are crippling and biting. And they're only going to get tougher. By next summer, when the sanctions on the central bank and the European oil ban kicks in, they will reach a level that is completely unprecedented, not only against Iran, but I think unprecedented against any country. Those crippling sanctions, combined with the potential still for diplomacy to work, we think still now represents the best way to end the program once and for all. The aim here is not to just delay and set back the program. The aim is to end it. And the only way that can be accomplished is if the Iranians themselves take the same decision that South Africa or Libya and others have made, which is to get rid of their weapons once and for all. We're trying to make the pressure so intense that they will make that choice and do so swiftly. Now, Israel and the United States are constantly comparing notes, intelligence, everything else, and we agree that at this stage, Iran is not close yet to having a nuclear weapon. But we want to make very sure that they don't get there. And we have agreed, our view is that we will use any means ultimately that are necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Our strong preference is that the combination of pressure and diplomacy will yield that result. But as the president has said on many occasions, all options are on the table. And yesterday he made explicit those are political, diplomatic, economic, and military, if need be. But our view is that there is still time and space left for diplomacy backed by increasingly strong pressure to yield the desired result, which is a permanent end to the nuclear program of Iran. But if that ultimately proves unsuccessful, then, as you've heard the president say, all options remain on the table.
A follow-up question that came from our colleague Rabbi Steve Lindemann, who unfortunately had to go home to perform a funeral in his congregation. He asked, how is it possible that Iran, as a member state of the UN, can stand and call for the destruction of another member state of the UN and yet remain in place as a member state?
That's a good question. There's no doubt that when Ahmadinejad stands up in the UN General Assembly and rants in the most despicable and vile terms against Israel, he is violating every principle that we hold dear and every principle enshrined in the UN Charter. But unfortunately, the United Nations is a collection of every state, 193 now member states, many of whom we work with and agree with, and some of whom we don't. And for a member state to lose its ability to speak, its privileges, it has to be suspended by a majority vote, actually a supermajority vote, of the General Assembly. And while we and our closest allies and partners would happily seek to prevent that kind of vile speech and that kind of behavior by any member state, that is not, at this stage, a viewpoint that would gain that kind of supermajority. And so when Ahmadinejad gets up and says the outrageous and offensive things he does, we lead a walkout every year, like clockwork, with our allies and partners, and it's a large number, streaming out of his speech in protest. But I wish very much we didn't have to do that.
Thank you.